and we'll get started. So welcome, and Pat, I'm going to go ahead and mute you if that's okay.
Someone needs to.
Okay, and Sarah, I'm going to mute your session as well. So, and I'll be turning those on throughout the for discussion. So, and I'll be trying to monitor the chat as we go along. So everyone should see the screen with the animation, and this is Powtoon. So it's a fairly new web-based presentation tool, and worth looking at, I think, to kind of pizzazz up some of our presentations. At least I think it helps me with pizzazzing mine. So you can let me know what to think about it at the end. So today we're going to talk about 4-H camp staff training and in it to win it. So we get this once-a-year opportunity to work with our camp staffs to help them understand their roles in this thing that we call 4-H camp, and the important job that they have in helping to keep kids safe and have them have fun in a research-based learning opportunity. So we're in it to win it, and a lot of times we only get the one shot in order to make a difference in those camp staff, who then ripple out and have impacts on our campers. So I put the "and justice for all" in here for a couple things. One is to connect us to our USDA partnership, and to basically connect this presentation to that, but also to keep in mind that as we do camp staff training, that we have an obligation to let them know about our civil rights components of our mission, and to remind them of our civil rights requirements in providing equal opportunities to all. So please make sure that you keep that in the forefront as you're looking at your staff training as well. And I know that many folks do a really good job with that. So I'm going to unmute everybody here for a second, and we're a small group, so I think we can have some discussion. So first question is, what does successful training of camp staff look like? What does it look like in Thurston County, in Island County, in your county? Now's the time that you would say something.
Thank you for that clue, Mike.
Yes, yeah. Any ideas? I'm going to unmute you all. Or you can use the chat window if you're more comfortable with that than using microphones. So what does successful training of camp staff look like?
Well, Mike, just to get the discussion started, I would say that everybody lived.
That's a good point.
I find if I set the standards low enough, even I can meet them.
That's not a good thing to not have everyone in your camp staff training survive.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
They feel confident.
Okay, that they feel confident. Okay, so confident in their job and in what's expected of them.
And the expectations and their ability to meet those expectations.
Okay. Now we can see you. Anything else? What else might help us make sure that they're successful in the training? What is it going to look like? Tough crowd today. Let's go on to the second one. How will you know if you achieve success in your camp staff training?
You have a successful camp.
Okay. So you're going to wait all the way to the end of camp to determine whether or not your staff training was successful.
Well, that's just one measure.
Okay.
That would be the final measure.
Okay. And that would probably give you some good information about planning for the next. Anybody else?
The staff understand where their jobs are.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch.
Oh. The staff understands their abilities and jobs and what they need to be doing.
Yeah, I still didn't catch that. Still getting some reverberation on your microphone. You may want to use the chat box, if you would, please. Okay. Ask attendees how they're feeling, comfortable, enthusiastic. Great. Lost. Yeah, good. Good. Terrified. Hopefully not. Okay, good. And then how will you involve your staff, volunteers or paid staff or other colleagues in the camp staff training? Okay, so on the last one, understanding for jobs and how it fits together. Good. So how will you involve staff in the training?
You break them into small groups and have them facilitate with
Okay. So kind of the learn by doing model. That's good. So get them involved, and it's also good in the planning stages to look at how we might involve the staff, and then even you looking at staff or campers evaluations of the last year to help look at those ideas. So good. Okay. Well, I'll let you off the hook, and I'll do most of the talking for a little while, and then I'll connect it back in. So I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody. But good, I just want to have a little bit of interaction as we're going along. So some of the things that you really want to make sure that you're connecting your staff to are the organizational mission and vision. But even more specific would be that you have a mission statement and objectives for your 4-H camp. It's fine to look at our state mission and vision, but I think it's really important that we boil that down and that everyone at camp, all the staff at camp, have a clear mission of what camp is trying to accomplish for your county and for the specific campers that you have. The other thing is making sure that we're connecting our staff, whether they're volunteers or if they're paid staff, with our research-based education. That's what sets us apart from all of the other camps that may be in a community or an area, is our connection to the research-based education. And then making sure that we're building in and training staff or reminding staff of the skills to make it experiential as part of that learning at camp. The other things that are really critical to make sure that we're covering in camp training are things like the specific camp policies and rules. So that gets to some of the specific rules, procedures, emergency procedures that you're going to have for camp. Also the things that they need to know and abide by. So again, going with clear expectations of what we're expecting of all staff and how they're going to perform those duties throughout camp. And then making sure that you're very specific in your expectations about issues such as alcohol, marijuana, tobacco use, dress code, staff interactions with campers, use of electronics, and those kinds of things. And it's not just good enough to talk about it as the extension staff, as camp directors, we have to actually live those things that we're expecting our staff to be part of. And this is one of those areas of making sure that we're setting that example and living that example throughout the camp. So we set the tone, and camp staff orientation or training, whatever we call it, is really that opportunity to set the tone. And each one of the specific camp rules and policies need to be printed and then given to folks as some kind of a handbook that they can keep with them, but then also that you have a sheet that gets signed that says that they've read and agreed to comply by these policies. And whether they're volunteers or paid staff, there are still representatives of WSU Extension and 4-H at the camp. And so we need to basically set those standards and figure out ways we can hold them accountable. The other thing that's really, I think, critical is a written job description. And making sure that the job description is flexible enough, but then also specific enough that it helps to make them feel comfortable and not feel terrified about the job that they're taking on and the expectations that we're going to have of them. And connecting them to the 4-H program, our philosophy, how we basically do business. And I think the job description is the opportunity that we can have that. And I think that there's plenty of examples of camp type job opportunities that are out there. It's just important to be written. And then also in that job description would be that if their role requires any kind of a special certification, that you specify that certification within that job description. And then the other thing that is really important from the risk management side is that where we require credentials for camp staff, that you do the due diligence and do the checking on those credentials to make sure that they're current and that they're valid for the roles that we're expecting those staff to take on. I'm going to unmute everybody for a second. Any questions so far on what we're covering? Pat, anything you'd want to add?
Oh, thank you for unmuting me, Mike. Thank you, but you know, since you've got the written job description right here on the screen, I guess throughout the years, that would be the one thing that I'd say I think we fail at most. See, the most unnecessary, because of course we all know what a camp director needs to do, and yet when a problem arises, and then the first question always is, well, I didn't know you expected me to do that.
Right.
So I have to circle back around to, even though we don't like getting in and doing that, digging around and getting that job description done, I think it really is important. The more detail that goes into it, I think the more successful camp you're going to have. Yeah,
and it is probably even more critical for folks who are in that volunteer role than it is even for folks that are paid staff. Because the paid staff, we've already gone through some kind of a process to get there. The volunteers are the ones that we tend to let fall between the cracks. And I'll offer that if somebody needs help in developing those, I'm not going to write your job description for you, but if you need help in developing those or critiques on those, then I'm happy to take a look at those. I'm going to put everybody else back on mute again. So a couple things that I think are really important to remember about staff training is that the whole point of staff training is to help staff be awesome at what their job is. And that's why we do the training. Not just the thing that we check off to make sure that we're doing the camp standards. It's really to make sure that we are supporting the folks that are going to be our camp staff, because they have such an important role so that they can be the best that they can be in doing the job that we're asking them to do. And I think when we bring that group together, we need to ask them to participate like it's the most important class that they've ever taken in their lives. Because what we're talking about is really a very intense experience that youth are going to have at camp. And to make that experience fun, educational, and safe requires that we have camp staff, whether volunteers or paid, who are really good at what they're doing, and that not only do they have to get 4-H and what it does, but they also have to get kids, and then they've got to be good at some skills that they're going to be imparting to youth, all in this outdoor environment. And so we really want to make sure that they're well supported and that this is really the most important class of their life. And we need to prepare that class to basically do the planning for that class like it's the most important presentation that we're ever going to do in an extension, because of that intensity of that experience that youth have at camp. It's really important that we get started at with the best possible training and best possible programming that we can offer to our volunteers. And once the campers are at camp, we can't go back and instill all your camp gems, and we can't help them go back and get the things that they would have missed. So we get that one opportunity to really set that stage. So it really does take a lot of planning and preparation in order to pull off a very good camp staff training or orientation. And the other thing is that it requires that we get 100% participation of the folks that are going to be at that camp staff. And because camp staff orientations also help to set the community of the camp counselors or camp staff, you can't do it more than once. So you really need to make sure that you get everybody committed to dedicate the time before camp to have that camp training. So one of the things that I think is really important is, again, looking at those required certifications for certain programs and either helping the camp staff to get those certifications, or again, making sure that they're current or that they get the updates that they may need. And then looking at program-specific training for the jobs that we're going to ask folks to do. So if we're going to ask somebody to teach kind of the no trace, leave no trace camping and using camp stoves, then we have an obligation to make sure that we've given them the skills that they need to take youth and teach them about that. And then we have to have some way that we can document that we've looked at their skills, or that somebody who's proficient in that has looked at their skills and they've been successful in using the tools as well as potentially in teaching them. The other thing that we need to look at is making sure that we're grounding each of our camp staff, even if they've been recurring camp staff, in the ages and stages information. And that we also cover within the training and give opportunities for folks to kind of demonstrate their thought processes and making decisions about appropriate contact and touch with campers. And I think sometimes we gloss over this, especially if we've got camp staff that have been around for a while, that we say, well, they know how to do all this stuff. They've been here before. But I think we really need to demonstrate and to document that we've gone through these training exercises with our staff each year. One of the important components of camp staff training is the cultural preparedness. And this is really helping the camp staff to understand the campers that will be there and to understand the role of 4-H as part of 4-H camp, of delivering the 4-H program through the camping program, and to understand the important role that they play, really the critical role that they play in making camp successful. We need to help them to understand acceptable language around youth, and to help them to exercise, kind of the good judgment, and we need to set the tone for that as well. We need to help them be prepared for appropriate conversations with youth, and just as we do with mentor training, we need to help our camp counselors to understand that there's the boundaries between their role as a camp staff or camp counselor versus being part of the group with the youth. Dress code and appearance, whether they're on duty or off duty, what they do speaks volumes to the youth about what's acceptable and what isn't. Also, in dealing with how they might share music, videos, and movies, and making sure that the content and the information, again, research-based, that it connects with what our mission is for extension. Also about what activities they'll do with campers, and to give them a toolbox of activities that are appropriate to use. And then also how they themselves assimilate into camp life, as well as how they work with the campers themselves, and making sure that each camper has that opportunity to assimilate and really be part of the 4-H camp life, and get the fullest potential out of the learning opportunity and the fun. And then we need to practice and give staff the opportunity to look at how they'll potentially deal with conflict, and then give them the tools, or remind them of the tools that they have to deal with behaviors that may not be appropriate or acceptable, and then to give them the procedures for how they deal with issues of conflict and with behaviors. I'm gonna unmute everybody again. So any questions or comments, or anybody have any experiences with kind of the components of the staff training that we were talking about?
Mike, have you had any experience, sometimes when I've done staff training, particularly with young people who are serving in particular roles, or some of those older teens who, technically may be adults, but, are still on the teenish side of life. Have you had any experience with them being cliquish, forming cliques? We've always been here together. How do you go about expanding their vision of who's part of their family for camp?
Yeah, and part of that is kind of setting the tone. I think that kind of the area we're at right now, helping the community. So when you do a camp staff training, you're really trying to create that opportunity for the community, and that's where the potential for cliques or friendships or come into play, and kind of bringing that up to the forefront and talking about the impact that the cliques can have on camp, not only within the camp staff, but across the entire camp. And then what are some of the observable signs of that, and then what are some of the techniques that staff can do to help integrate everyone into the camp community. Part of it too, I think, goes back to camp mission, and making sure that the camp mission is inclusive in how it kind of sets that tone. And then that mission has to kind of permeate throughout the entire camp training and orientation of campers, and then what happens in camp cabins, of really trying to make sure that they're inclusive and not being exclusive. And it can be difficult, especially in long established camps. But you have a new opportunity each year as you bring the staff together. You kind of get a snapshot each year and each week that you camp of different campers and different camp staff that has a new opportunity to reconnect. And so it's really trying to use that opportunity to kind of set that stage, I think is probably the best opportunity we have. Anybody else have any suggestions for dealing with cliques or how you address that as part of camp staff training? Boy, this is a tough crowd. Okay, well, we'll continue on with the presentation. If you had any, okay, so we've got a couple questions here. I'll deal with those. So, had an experience with a counselor sharing how to perform inappropriate sexual activities. Would have helped to ask each cabin of kids how things are going. Instead, it was reported to parents. Ooh, yeah, that's not good. So, so anything that you would have done differently then to kind of prevent that? Yeah, check in with kids throughout camp. You know, the other thing too is part of that camp staff community is making sure that you have time to check in with the camp staff themselves. And so at camps that I've been at, we try to have a time either very early in the morning or at night to where we bring everyone together and just do a quick check on how things are going, what the needs are. It usually revolves around what needs to be purchased because they broke it or need something to for a program the next day. But using that opportunity and to ask a couple critical questions about what has gone well today and what would be some things that if you had the opportunity you'd do differently. And sometimes just helping to ask a couple questions of the camp staff can really go a long way. From Sarah, help the staff to understand the importance of appropriate conversations and topics, establishing appropriate boundaries. Sometimes younger adults not really understand what is appropriate. Role modeling during training would be very helpful. Yes, and yeah, role playing, role modeling, getting the camp staff talking about situations that were uncomfortable, and then getting some kind of group suggestions on how they might go about doing it. So yeah, involve the staff. They've got questions and answers that can be benefits to everyone. And it also helps to build that community that we're trying to do as part of camp. Okay, I'm gonna put everyone back on mute. So the other thing that we need to do is making sure that all of our camp staff are prepared for camp. And we want to make sure that we're reminding them of all the things that are part of camp before they come to camp. So one is physically. And again, going back to that job description, that as mundane as it seems, but putting in the physical expectations of their role at camp is pretty important. So even down to the person who's going to be doing the cooking, they're going to have to be able to, you know, lift a bag of potatoes or do these other tasks. They may not realize that they may have to be up at 4 a.m. in order to do that. But knowing those physical expectations of the job can help folks to decide whether or not this is going to be what they want to do, and letting them know early on what's expected of them, and then asking them to be physically prepared for that week or 2 weeks of camp or 4 days of camp is really important. The other thing is medically, and you know, the making sure that they are healthy enough that they've got their kind of doctor's appointments and other things that are taking place hopefully before, making sure that they've gone through that medical check, and that your health care professional who's working with camp has gone through those and screened those to make sure that they are basically fit for camp. And then making sure that we're asking the question about, is there anything that's happened in the last week or two that we need to know about as you physically or medically participate in camp? Because I've had folks who have, you know, just had a surgery a week before, and then they come to camp, which puts them and us in a very difficult position. The other thing is psychologically, of making sure that we've got the right folks for camp, because there are some folks who, you know, just do not do well at camp, who do not like camp, and yeah, I know, Pat, I know, so making sure that that they are psychologically prepared for the week of camp and the rigors that it will be. The other thing medically that I want to say is that anybody who comes to camp with any kind of medications needs to basically turn over those medications to your camp health professional. They should not have their own medications to take. It should all be ran through the camp medical professional. Sometimes it's hard for adults to give up their Tylenol or their, unless it's something that they may need for anaphylactic shock or those kind of things. They probably should be, all those medications should be turned over to the camp health medical folks, who then dispense those medications as much as they do for campers. So staff well-being is one of those things that we sometimes don't put that expectation out, and we don't figure out ways to monitor how the staff well-being is going, and especially for ourselves. So again, medications, camp is not the time for folks to take vacation from the medications that they normally take during the rest of their life. And we need to make sure that we're putting clear expectations that folks need to anticipate their medication needs. And then folks who are on any kind of medications that are volunteers or with medical conditions, we need to really work closely with camp nurse or medical professionals. Time off is really kind of an issue. I mean, many of our camps are very intense, and there may not be opportunities for time off. Or if time off is given, it's just, you know, kind of a couple hours here or there within the program day where they don't have responsibilities. But it's really important that we help to put that expectation of the social aspects of camp are appealing, but the expectation is that time off is to really refresh, renew, revitalize, and be prepared for the next grueling time of camp. That it's not for the opportunity to go out and party and socialize, but really that we need their commitment to be there for youth at camps as opposed to the social aspects. And then the personal care, setting that expectation early on, even within the job description of in order to take care of others, it requires that we take care of ourselves. So the importance of sleep and finding the time to decompress. And that means everybody, including extension staff and camp directors and program directors at camp, that we need to make sure that within the planning of camp that there is that time for folks to decompress, and that we figure out ways that we can basically cover for the folks that are in those key leadership roles during the time that we need to decompress, and that we respect that time because it's important that they be at their best. Pat, did you want to chime in?
Could you tell I was just rabid with anticipation? You're not going to believe this when I share this, but this is the actual truth. A few years ago, we had one of our staff members who was also the camp director materialize at camp, having just delivered a baby 2 weeks before, and with a nursing 2-week-old infant in arm. And while pregnancy is not a disease and new motherhood is not a disease or an illness, it is an exhausting process. And I won't go into the gory details, but it led to all kinds of incredible complications, mostly which focused around a camp director being too tired to carry out their functions, and therefore they weren't able to supervise the other staff, which had an entire snowball effect. So
Sure.
This attention to personal care really is important. And I appreciate everyone's enthusiasm for their jobs, but there are things that I think just go beyond expectation. And I think directing a camp 2 weeks after delivering a baby is one of those things.
That's a little intense. Yeah, and I really recommend that as you're looking at camp staff job descriptions, that putting in the expectation of personal care as part of that camp job description, I think is really important. The other thing that sometimes during camp we need to remind camp staff of is that camp is for campers. That even though camp can be fun for camp staff, it is really the focus of the campers that is the critical component. And so making sure that the activities that camp staff participate in are focused in on the educational opportunities for campers and not just for the fun of camp staff. Regression is one of those things that we need to be aware of, and that we need to bring it to the forefront in our camp staff orientation, especially where we have kind of younger camp staff. In that when you live and work and play with children, it may create the side effect that staff start acting like campers. And we need to be able to identify that behavior and then pretty much to turn that around and to focus in on campers. So we need to help them to keep their eyes and brains focused on the prize. And of course, the prize is the educational opportunities that are presented to the youth, them having fun, and of course being safe. And again, that is something that we set the tone for and create those expectations, and then follow through on those expectations with observations. The other thing I think we sometimes forget about is teaching our staff how to ask for help. These are tremendous jobs that we're placing on our volunteers and our paid camp staff for very intense periods of time. And we need to teach them how to ask for help. So communication and feedback are really critical to our success of all our camp programs. We need to make sure that we're building in times to connect, to see how things are going, to make suggestions or corrective actions if we have to with staff in those situations, and then to reinforce the training that takes place at the camp staff training every opportunity that we have, and tying it back to vision and mission of camp and purpose of 4-H and why we're there and the importance that camp experience is going to have on youth. So we need to make sure that we're taking those times to connect, and not only connect on the job role, but the bigger picture of camp. And then we need to make it safe to ask for help or clarification. And we need to make sure that that is part of the expectation that if somebody is in a difficult situation, that they need help, that they can call out and ask for help or for clarification. And again, building in a time each day to connect with staff gives that opportunity. So training scenarios are really important. We talked about role modeling during training, and we need to think about the situations that have been issues for us in the past, or issues at camp in the past, and prepare for those, but then also brainstorm with the group to think about what are some of the situations that you don't think you have an answer for right now, and to cover some of those in camp staff training, or in if you have the luxury of some periodic trainings throughout a camp season that you can do, and helping them to know what they should do, really kind of setting that tone, helping them to do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons is really what we have that opportunity in camp staff training to do. And again, we only get that one shot usually just prior to camp. So 4-H camp rocks, right? Right, Pat?
If you say so, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? This is kind of a brief overview, just kind of some general things to get you fired up for camp staff training, which for some of you is right around the corner. Anybody have any comments that they'd like to add? Well, I appreciate everyone being part of today's training. If you have some ideas or suggestions for additional Zoom trainings that you'd be interested in, let me know. If I don't hear any, you're stuck with what comes to my mind. So next week we'll have the state 4-H staff training, and I'll be also asking them to suggest. We will have archery webinar. We'll have one on horse camp webinar. A few others still coming down the road. So,
Mike, I would suggest one future topic that just came to top of mind today is we had an incident that occurred at shooting sports camp, and I know it was shooting sports event, but it was ATV inappropriate usage. So that may be something that some camps may face as well.
yeah. So, yeah, just let me know how I can help. If by chance you haven't submitted your intent to camp and you're within the 30 or 60 days, contact me right away. I want to do everything we can to support you in being successful at camp. We want to make sure that you're protected, and that we're all doing the due diligence that we need to make sure that we're protecting kids as they participate in 4-H through the camp experience.
And Mike, you've got a question that's come in asking about how frequently people are conducting camp training.
The expectation, I guess, my expectation would be that you do it annually. Before each year at camp, that you're bringing your staff together and doing training. There may be, kind of periodic other things that folks would need to do, but you can use, some of the content that we're creating with the camp training as part of supplemental things to your camp staff training, or if you have some specific needs, we have access to the American Camping Association through some of their resources. And again, I remind folks that if you haven't taken advantage of that opportunity of the first year free with American Camping Association, send me an email, I'll send you the link. It's a good tool that helps us supplement what we do in extension. So this is to answer your question about do you do these trainings every year, and does Mike do web conferences each year? This is my first year as the 4-H camp specialist, and this seemed to be the best way to get some of this training out. If there's more intense training that's needed for new camp directors, then I'm happy to look at how we do that. But Pat has been generous enough to provide me opportunities to do the training, and the webinars seem to work well. If you need something more, let me know. Anything else, Pat?
I think it's just that my that my body's so irritated and.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, and 4-H Camp rocks.